And he is? He wants to. Here we go. Okay, very good. Ray, yes, come on. All yours.
Thank you. I apologize for being right to the last second here. So. Yeah, it'd be easy with the handheld. Yeah, thank you. It's 37. Psalm 37 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and give you the desires of your heart." And one of the desires of my heart, at least in seminary days, was to minister to the Jewish people. And that I had opportunity to read a book entitled "The Puritans' Hope." And the Puritans, all had a great vision for the salvation of all Israel. It says in Romans 11:36 that all Israel shall be saved. And so there was this vision that before Christ would come, that there would be a great revival amongst the Jewish people, and that, quote, all Israel would be saved. And so that was a vision that I kept in my heart. Now, at the time, I really didn't know any Jewish people. I mean, I guess I knew some people, but I didn't know they were Jewish, and never had any particular focus upon ministering to the Jewish people. So that was way back when I was in seminary in 1970, 71, in that time frame. And so, as a pastor, I just focused on finding a church and whatnot. But that the Lord revived that vision in my heart, so that by I wanted to go to Israel in order to minister to the believers there, and particularly in a congregation, our congregation, with the congregations in Israel. And so that was revived in my heart, and so I had the privilege of going with Tom Warman on what amounted really more to a study trip to Israel in 1991. And it was really, really important time because we had an excellent guide, and he went through how the geography of Israel revealed God's plans and will, and it was stunning. I mean, it was just electrifying to me to look at the land and to see it through, how it revealed God's plan. And so that was very, very significant. And I expected I'd never go back again, but I had a wonderful time with Tom, and he was a mere 30 years old, younger than his son John. And we got pictures, and he looked just like John. It's amazing, how special that time was. So that was 1991, and but the vision didn't go away, and so in God's providence, the Lord brought Jim and Karen Melnick to our congregation, I believe in 1994 or 93, and so in that interim period, I had wanted to build a connection between our congregation and believers and congregations in Israel. And so, I began inquiring about ministries that we could go help with. I mean, I said, we'd do anything, paint, I don't know, not construction work, not that I'm any good at construction, but whatever it is you need us to do, we'll fit in with whatever your plan is. And I just got, no, don't come, send money. You're an American, what can you do for us? The one thing about Jewish people I love is you never have to guess what they're thinking. That they're pretty straightforward, So, but that was one response. Don't come, you're an American, what can you do? And so forth. So, it's kind of discouraging. Then I had all kinds of quarterlies and things that I read all the time. And one was the Missions Quarterly. And I saw an advertisement there for Yes, Israel, through AMF, which used to stand for American Messianic Fellowship, I believe. And so I called them and said, could we do something with whatever congregations or whatever people you have over there in Israel? And I explained what I want to do. And he said, no. The fellow said, no, you don't want an Yes Israel trip. You have to speak to Bill Curry. I said, okay, fine, I'll speak to Bill Curry. So I called Bill Curry up, and he was so thrilled. And he set up the entire trip, rented the van, made all the arrangements as to where to stay and pastors to go meet. And so then, I tried to put together a missions team. And I thought, we would have so many people that would want to go to Israel from our congregation that, what am I going to do with all these people, And so as it turned out, we only had 7 people who wanted to go. But 2 of them were Jim and Karen. I forget now at what stage, but shortly after, I tried to visit everybody at church. And I remember going over to Jim and Karen's, and Jim produces this book, and he says, have you ever read this book, The Puritan Hope? And I said, yes, I love that book. It's a vision of how God, through the power of the gospel, brings a great worldwide revival. And that was my heart. And he does it primarily through the Jewish people. So that's about as much as, that's about where I was. But anyway, I remember finding a brother who shared this vision, with me, in Jim and in Karen too. But I spoke to Jim primarily, and it was like a wonder, So anyway, Jim and Karen went on this trip, and together with Stan Roberts, who was MacGyver. We had to, we did get stuck out out on the other side of the Dead Sea. The van just stopped, and somehow he was able to circumvent the whole electrical system and the I don't know, whatever it is that protects keeps the car from starting. I don't know. He circumvented the whole thing, got it going in about 10 minutes, which was good because it was like 100. I don't know, it was like 110 out or something. It was really, really hot, and so I don't want to spend all the time on that. But I just want to focus upon how special that first trip was in June of 1995. Now, I learned not to ever go again the end of June because it is so hot. It's just, I thought I'd die. I thought I'd never get back. And so that's where, where I really got to know Jim and Karen. And so we want to pick it up really in that time frame. So now, have you shown the video? Okay, we have some pictures. It'd be just easiest just to show all the slides and then refer back to them. But
we're going to tag team here, and so
yeah, we're going to tag team this.
So let's see.
But yeah, so it's more than 25 years now. But this is our first trip.
Our first team and our most recent team. And that was the first team at Mitzvah Ramon on our way down to Eilat. And there's Bill Curry. Karen and I on our first trip. Yeah, I know. It looked like teenagers, right? Anyway, the Russian Messianic newspaper started in 1994, and because of support of this church and others, and really the encouragement of this church, and we got support from other groups as well. It went all over the world. And Doug, you always have encouraged us on these trips to keep a journal, and so this, as I was preparing for this presentation, I went back to found my journal entries from June 1995, and you remember the thing about the Dove. You met Dove, and he said, "No, not going to go with me." And I was like, the second he looked at me, he goes, I spoke to him in Russian, so Dove said, "Okay, well, you can come," but he was very gruff. Yeah, to pass out tracts, so you didn't pass.
Oh, so I said, could I go? And he said, no.
So my notes here, I said I went out for the first time with him. We were at the shelter. This was in Eilat, which is in the southern, very tip of Israel, to witness to Russian Jews. We passed out Russian Bibles, the newspapers we had by that time. And Dove and I said, got on very well once we had a chance to talk and do ministry together. So there's a lot packed into that sentence, And we met and talked with about 20 to 30 Russian Jews. And then I said, we dove, I don't remember that, into the Red Sea with Dove. and to cool off, and what a joy it was. It was an amazing time, and it really was a great time to cool off because it was like, as Doug said, 110 or 120. It was unbelievable. And Doug, here's our second mission team in 1997. And please note the menorah up there on the banner. That was made by women of this church. And unfortunately, this was a time before cell phones we didn't have or smartphones, I should say. The Israelis had cell phones, and we went over there, and Dove was calling all over the country, and it was before we were using cell phones here very much at all, if at all. And I was just amazed. I mean, he was calling everybody. And he had this thing, we started calling it cell phone evangelism, because he would call people all over the place. He took us to different places in Israel. In this case, we were in the city of Rishon LeZion in Israel, and we found he would look for cranes. Now, why was he looking for cranes? Well, it was because of the Intifada, the Palestinian workers who used to pour into Israel as workers by the thousands or tens of thousands were blocked from coming in. And so Israel, since they weren't letting the Palestinians in, decided, we're going to bring in thousands and thousands of workers from all over the world. So they brought in Chinese, Romanians, Turks, whatever they could bring, whoever would come. And so people like Dove went around to minister to them, and he took us with him. In this case, we went up this Chinese worker site. They were putting up some skyscraper or something, and we passed out 60 Bibles to them. And then Dove got on his cell phone and called a Chinese pastor in Israel, connected with the foreman who was on the site, said, yeah, come on, you can speak to our men. And later Doug, baptized one of the Chinese believers, in the Red Sea. I mean, just amazing stories that we can't imagine now. It was almost, we had to pinch ourselves even when we were doing it at the time. Doug, do you want to say anything else about that?
No.
Okay. And the same with the Romanians there. I mean, there were workers of all different kinds. What I tried to do in this slideshow was I went through hundreds of slides, and it was impossible to catch everything. And I realize now I got to go back and really systematically try to find as much as I can of all the different years that we went. But anyway, this was, you recognize two of the people here in this shot. This was in Jerusalem, in one of the tunnels. We would often take teams there. That was 2002. And then this is 2005. Now, the first place we stayed in Israel on our mission trip in 1995 was what's called the Old House, which was used to be a Turkish fort until Israeli independence, and they drove the Turks out. The British drove the Turks out, and later Israel became a state. But a lot of the early battle took place here in Beersheba. Well, this was another battle. We went there the first time in 1995. It was this quiet little dusty street. Nobody paid any attention. It was on the corner of Old Beersheba. And that's where the congregation met. That's where we slept. That's where we stayed and had our meals for the most part, or many of our meals. Anyway, years later, there was a baptism there, and the Orthodox Jews found out about it, and there was this riot. And it ended up in a big lawsuit. It was a big event. Anyway, this is right outside the place that we stayed at. We weren't there at the time. But as you can see, this was 8 years later. There's our banner, is still there during the riot now. After the riot, they came in, all these Orthodox Jews are standing around. They didn't know what to do. They're just sort of standing around at this point. But this was one of the pastors that we were very close to.
They did throw the pastor into the baptistry.
Right.
Break his glasses. I don't know. It was serious.
And, we still have, he's part of the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership today, Howard Bass, and a dear friend of ours. And Doug, you published this book in 2006, and it impacted me greatly, and I felt that it was really important for the Russian Jews to read it, so we translated it into Russian. So that's a Russian translation there on the right. And I urge you, if you haven't read any of Doug's books, this is a plug for his books, please ask him about it. His latest one, I don't have it in the slide program, but is Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem. And we need to be doing that. It's a command in the scripture, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And really, the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership is built around that.
Just to clarify, God's plan for peace is the gospel, that only Christ can bring peace to the land, and Arabs and Jews can learn to love each other, which we'll hear about later during the worship service from our partnership when Frank and Tracy speak. And they can love each other if they see beyond their own narratives, you know, the Arab narrative, you know, with a lot of resentment towards the Jewish people or the state of Israel, or the Israeli or the Jewish people for resentment towards the Arabs, and so it's that's God's plan for peace, is to come to Christ.
Amen. So also in 2006, we had this very important meeting with Dominic, who was here last week, Dr. Dominic Aquila, and Frank. And this was at Christ Church, which was actually the oldest Protestant church in the Middle East. But the Lord was starting to pull together a strategy for what eventually would become the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership. Here's some shots from those years, 2005, 2008.
May I comment about that meeting?
Yes.
Because of that first trip in 1991, I just really did the same, well, and also with Bill Curry. Bill Curry, at the end, would always do like a debrief. And if I may go back to 1995, Jim, you know, he took us around. We met some significant pastors, Dov Bekas, Yossi Ovadia, John Pex in Eilat. And just let me tell you just how hot it was. And when we got there, well, this is the other thing, is traveling with Jim was like traveling with the Apostle Paul. Oh, you're Jim Melnick, you know, I mean, he's read the newspaper. I mean, you know, it was like, you know, it needed no introduction because they knew all about him, at least from the standpoint of Russian Jewish evangelism. And so John Peck's first thing he says, how do you like our heat wave? And I thought, oh, you mean it's not always like this? Oh, no, he said, this is really hot. I said, how hot is it? He says, 49 degrees, and that's Celsius. And so I know anything over 30 here is really hot. So this is like at least half as much as that, you know, to 49. So I said, how hot is that in Fahrenheit? He says, I don't know, about 119. I thought, I will never leave this town. I mean, I'm going to melt right here. I've never been anywhere where it was 119. And so, yeah, I said, you know, Bill Curry told us we need to drink 2 liters of water a day. And he said, oh, no, you got to really drink 4 liters of water down here, you know. I think, oh, no, that sounds like work. And so I just figured out I had to drink a liter before breakfast or with breakfast, a liter at lunch, a liter at dinner, and somewhere along the line I had to drink another liter. So I had to strategize how to get all this drunk, all this water drunk. So ever since, I've learned to drink water. But prior to that, I thought, I don't, you know, when you're young, my grandmother told me to drink 6 glasses of water a day. So I thought it was the dumbest thing I ever heard when I was 15, you know. But, you know, after listening to John Pex, I thought, oh, goodness. He says a lot of people faint right in the street here that live here. And they have to be taken to the hospital. It takes days to get over being dehydrated. So it was quite the experience, you know, to get there. Now, I've sidetracked myself. In 1995. What was the last thing you said, Jim?
No, just talk about the this meeting.
Oh, the debrief.
Right.
And so going back to Bill Curry, but, you know, Bill is part of the greatest generation. Man, a few words, really didn't say hardly anything, you know, to us except where to go, what to do. And he drove the van all the way around and just let us off, and he'd sit in the van or whatever, and we'd go see whatever it is he showed us and whatnot. And so he really didn't say much. You know, I was the one that did the Bible teaching. And what's extraordinary about it is he's about as premillennial as you can get. As a matter of fact, he came here and was quoting from Jeremiah 31 about the new covenant, and that someday the new covenant would be fulfilled. And I could just see the whole Sunday school class gasp, you know, like I thought but what he meant was the salvation of the Jews is what he was equating with the new covenant, is all Israel being saved. And so, you know, we couldn't have been any more further apart, you know, evangelically speaking. I mean, still be evangelicals, theologically. But it's like he gave us all these relationships with John Judy Pex in Eilat, with Tom Jameson, who we worked with very closely for a long time, with Dov Bekas, with Yossi Ovadia, in particular. I mean, those, it's like he entrusted his ministry to me. And so forever after, we just went after, we did the same exact thing that he took us on the first time. Now, varied, you know, we met new people and so forth. But on the other hand, he always said it. But anyway, he always did this debrief at the end of it. And so, he wanted to know what we thought. And so, everybody went around, and he was very quiet and everything. And until the very end. And then he began to weep. He says, I have tried to get congregations interested in supporting and befriending and fellowshipping with congregations over here, and you're the very first church that ever came. And I was stunned. And so I feel like it was entrusted to us. It was a gift to me. Delight yourself in the Lord. He entrusted all these people into my hand, and I've been able to shepherd them for the last 25 years. And it helps to be from somewhere else, because if you're there too much, then you get involved in their politics and, and their difficulties. And if you just kind of come in for 3 weeks and you can encourage them and bless them and go home, then, so we've been able to maintain those relationships even over the phone now. So it's been quite extraordinary. So thank you, Jim, for that.
Well, Doug, he gave us a priceless gift of those relationships, and it ties in very much, Frank, with your sermon today, that was all built on relationships, everything in the end. It's God's relationship to us and then our relationship to one another. And that was the gift that Bill Curry gave to us. And upon that foundation of love and yielding up what was his, because God had raised him up to have incredible ministry in Israel, he gave that to us. And, a priceless gift that to us, who were entrusted with it, we cherish it, and we cherish it to this day. And we try to share it with others as God leads. So at this point, now we're thinking about, laying the foundation, 2006, for the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership. These are some slides from Jerusalem. My daughter Julie turned 16 in Jerusalem. We had a special day there. And Bella, a Russian Jewish woman, and Kathy Wilson were in Ashkelon. That's a special shot there. And we spent many years at the Jameson congregation, Tom Jameson and his wife Jan, and through them we had relationships that went and helped build what became the seminary, Israeli Theological Seminary. Here was our team in 2008. Sure.
I apologize for interrupting you, but
no, that was we planned this team tag, right. So it's fine.
So back in 2006.
Okay.
I mean, we have known Frank at that point probably 15 years. And, Frank and Cindy ministered in West Africa and Senegal, and we've told a story about the Senegalese Pentecost and all the rest, and the legendary status that Frank had from that, from the ministry, getting it started there in Senegal. So, always related him with Senegal. And so lo and behold, I find out that he's Jewish background. And he was given the Barit name of Zvi. I still can't put Zvi and you together, but anyway, I know that is the case. So that's his Hebrew name when he was Zvi. So anyway, he tells me all about his Jewish background, and so he says, I'd like to go with you on your trip. So we go over and with Dominic. And so, we showed him what we had in terms of relationships and whatnot. So, again, we do the debrief at the end, we're Christ Church out in the courtyard and having breakfast and so forth, and before Frank has to leave. And so, I go around and, Jim, what do you think? And Dominic, and Frank is a man of few words. At least that's my experience with him. He really doesn't say all that much. And so all of a sudden he says, well, I think that y'all are ready to start a partnership. And I'm thinking, we have 3 people, 4 people or whatever. And none of them were very thriving congregations back in 2006. And so I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to do this? So anyway, he had 6 ways that we could build this partnership. And it just floored me. It floored us all, I think, that we could do that. And so that's what then transpired that was September 2006. And by May, we had a meeting to be trained by Jeff Marlowe, another of our missionaries. and how the partnership works and how to proceed. And that's when we met Tracy Dagger. Tracy and Joy came and became very interested in what we were doing at that point. So I'll let him tell his story more then. But that stunning revelation of the partnership. And so anyway, so we get started in 2007. And it was by 2008 we had both Tracy and Joy and Ilya and Penina in Israel.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, I let...
And then we move on to the Four Amigos. So this was a very special trip, and that it was actually right after the Hezbollah, I think it was Hezbollah, was firing rockets into northern Israel. It was and nobody was in Israel. I mean, we were like the only tourists in Tiberias. I think you could have
we
put us.
We didn't even know the Intifada was on.
Yeah, yeah. They could have put all the tourists into one Volkswagen, as they used to say. And anyway, we had an amazing time. They saw that we were committed, because we were there at a time then. The shrapnel was still, in buildings. It was unbelievable. And it was also at that time that we were in Tiberias, the four of us, and God gave us what became our church vision, building the kingdom through training leaders. It was on a napkin, I think, in a restaurant in Tiberias. Yeah, Tom remembers, and Jimmy. Anyway, that was a great time together. And then, Doug, this was the birth of the Israel Theological Seminary. You see all the Russian there, and Dr. Douglas Kittredge is how it's pronounced in Russian. And this was our graduation in 2008. Just an amazing day. Again, we poured ourselves into these men, and God gave us a very blessed time. And we hope someday to maybe have a reunion again with all of them and see God's using many of them in all different ways in ministry around Israel. Graduation, 2008. And this was a late Pastor Andre. We had special relationships with his church, and they were very committed, sending men to the seminary. And this was an Uzbek Russian, there are all kinds of these little slices of different people groups that came to Israel. And Ole and Andre were represented one. And then we moved on to Haifa. As Doug mentioned, Ilya Lazorkin had joined us at that point, he and Penina. And so we had graduated the 2008 class, and then by 2011, with Dr. Aquila's support from the seminary in Denver, they gave credentials to running this course at Haifa Theological Seminary Institute through Leon Mazin, whom we're very close to, who later became part of the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership. And anyway, so this was graduation day, and then 3 years later at this institute. So this morphed into what we had started in the Israel Theological Seminary into what became the Haifa Theological Institute, which continues in different forms, even now. And this was a graduation diploma in biblical studies. And Doug, anything you want to add on that, or? Okay. And this was our 2016 Israel mission team. And you see Catherine Marple is here, is now with the Lord. A very special time we had together with the Marples and the Roots and others who were on that team. The 2019 mission team, Jay led that team, and you can see that some of our members here. We also, during that year, had the Echad. I was part of the Echad music group, and so we had sort of two things going on, and Jay and I had this very complicated, schedule. It all worked out great, where we had the Echad music group playing in certain cities, and we'd meet up with the New Life team and do some things together, and then split up for other things. Food's a big thing in Israel, so this is the commercial time. If you want to come and really enjoy yourself food-wise, come on a mission trip to Israel when it all opens up again. And here's our latest team, 2020. This beautiful shot we had in Caesarea in 2020. And, we don't know what the next steps are going to be. Jay had hoped to take a team this year in 2021. We were going to then alternate years in terms of leading the teams, but just pray about that. We want to get back, and we have so many relationships we want to continue. As Doug has said, he continues them very much online and on the phone, but we want to get back in person to see our dear brothers and sisters. I don't know if we can play any of this. This is our most recent team. Sean, if that'll come out or not. We're singing at what some believe was the Mount of Beatitudes. Wonderful to me. Tiberias, one of the places we love to stay, Beit Bracha, House of Blessing. And, just beautiful scenes from the Sea of Galilee. If you go to Israel, Bill Curry introduced us to St. Peter, what's called St. Peter's fish. It's one of the main dishes in Israel. And so when you go to the Sea of Galilee, it's one of the things we hope everybody will enjoy. This is, I just threw this in. Rebbe Schneerson is one of the main Jewish guys who, he's passed away now, but many Orthodox Jews believe he's the Messiah. You see his signs everywhere. He died in 1994. Anyway, he's one face you see all over Israel. Carmiel, Israel, we've had many church-to-church relationships there. This is Pastor Yossi, and one of our first trips, on our first trips, we had wonderful relationships with him. We met in his apartment, and Doug gave him counsel and mentored him and the family, and now he's one of the most respected and well-known pastors in the country, and just a very dear pastor. And here we have the 2019 team talking with Yossi. They have this wonderful sign on all the names of God from the Scripture in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And when I first met him, Yossi, there was a Russian-Jewish couple that, so many had a very difficult time financially, and there was one couple that they were into baking. And I knew they struggled for years, and then the last time I was there in Carmiel, I said, how's this couple doing? How are they doing? He goes, come with me. I got to show you something. We drive. He's like, what? He takes me to this place. It's a master chef in Israel, in Carmiel. And then right across from the congregation, they have a massive factory. They used to be they had a little corner, did some baking, and now employ all kinds of people. So it's been a wonderful success. We've had wonderful relationships with Jerusalem Baptist Church. This is the man that got us there, Bruce Mills. And Doug has preached here many, many, many times. He became a beloved pastor to them. They get a lot of crazy people who come to Jerusalem who talk about everything under the sun, as you can imagine. And they said, we are so thankful for you, Pastor Doug. You come and just preach the pure word. You give us the meat that we need. And so, he was invited back again and again. In fact, Doug even gave, as I could call, several series of sermons sometimes when you come in.
I had the privilege, because they were without a pastor. We started there in 2003 anyways, right through probably 2015. They were without a pastor, so I was going twice a year on alternate years. And basically I went February, October. February, let's see, how did I do it? February and October, and then May, February and October. So I would be there 6 Sundays out of the year to preach, and so in many ways they viewed me as their pastor, even though I was only there six times. But I am so thankful to the leadership of this congregation, the elders. Thank you, and to the congregation for allowing me to go all of these many, many times. And I can't express my gratitude enough for the wonderful privilege it has been to raise up, probably at least a dozen trained pastors through Israel Theological Seminary in Haifa. There was 8, and then we graduated at least 4 or 5 from Haifa in 2011. And all of them are ministering, and what their testimony was when we heard their stories was, they knew the Lord, they loved the Scriptures, but now I have greater confidence in being able to teach God's Word. I feel like I really know what I'm talking about, not just guessing, really. And so they didn't use the word guessing, but that was the essence of it. And so it was a big deal to train these leaders for the congregations. And so the congregations we saw, like at Yossi Ovadia, we met in their apartment for the first, 1995, 97, 98, when we went in 98. I think even in 2002, they were still, well, they had moved to a home, but it was still a very small home. And now they have probably one of the larger congregations in the country. Now, a large congregation in Israel is probably 125 to 150. So that's a big congregation.
Which is big for Israel, yeah.
Yeah, that's big for Israel. And just tremendous. And they've planted several other churches. And so, all of this, the seed money came from the Faith Promise. And by God's grace, there have been many other people that have helped support me to go. So it wasn't totally from the Faith Promise. But without the Faith Promise, I'd never started even. So, it's dramatically helped the congregation in Carmiel, which is Haderek, in Hebrew it's the Way, which isn't a very good name over here because that was a cult back in the 70s anyways, so I don't know. But they didn't know that over there. But, and also we built close relationships with David Zadok, which we'll hear more about later, in just outside of Rishon LeZion. I can never remember it. It's a little suburb of that major city. The whole ministry with Dov Bekas, I really became very close with Dov and ministered to him. He went through at least 5 church splits. And I thought, and he suffered. And so did Leon Moslin. He went through at least 2. And it's tough because it's the people who you love the most, you've discipled and you've trained and you hope to become leaders in the congregation, and all of a sudden they decide that they know better than you and you're really not that spiritually minded anyways, and so then they go and do their own thing. And it happened over and over again with both of them in particular, but some other cases too, but those are the 2 most notable. And so it's been a wonderful joy and delight. And as Jim said, what they appreciated is a lot of people come to Israel and they're trying to fulfill prophecy or something. They think if they do something grand to minister the gospel, send out a lot of tracts and, I don't know, do something, that'll help God along, I guess, with his prophetic clock. And, we don't have, our only goal is to try to be your friend, your brother, and to encourage your work. And what do you need us to do, that's what we did, whether passing out tracts or, I was so proud of my son, Drew, and Andrew Ewing, because Andrew's, built a contractor, and he put up the tile work, beautiful tile work for the kitchen for that bakery that Jim showed you, and they did it in like 6 hours, and I was amazed at how well they did it. And so there's a lot of other things. We cleaned the church up at Haderek, that helped organize and put stuff in closets and that sort of thing. So, it wasn't all just personal or ministry related and so forth. So it's, all of this really came from the investment you all made through Faith Promise. I never would have known how to finance it, and how to do it. And by 2002, I realized we were driving through the Negev, the desert, the wilderness, and I had gotten so I could choreograph the whole thing. I had Michael Card songs and some other songs to play when we went to certain places, and so I had the whole thing, not the whole thing, but a lot of it choreographed, and it developed a whole teaching series out of the whole thing. And but 2002, we were driving through the wilderness, and all of a sudden it just hit me that the wilderness is the best place to be found. And we come to a wilderness, personally, as a family, as a church. And the Lord found us. And he picked us up and he gave us so many opportunities, not just with Israel, but, here in the Christ Covenant School, it started 2003 or something like that. So a lot of ways with the Korean church, with, our other ministries in West Africa and Peru and whatnot. Everything accelerated after that. And so it was how this congregation came together and the Lord brought us together. So we were a true covenant community, and taking responsibility for one another's children, taking responsibility for one another's spiritual growth, for one another's character, and through care groups and all that. And that's what it means to be a Christian. And a part of a church is you take responsibility not just for your own character, but other people's character. I mean, not full responsibility. I mean, Galatians 6 says you have to bear your own burden, but on the other hand, we're commanded to bear one another's burdens too. So it's a both and, not either or. So anyway, I can't. The problem with this clock is it has the glare of the sun right behind it, so it's hard for me to read. But Sean's up, so I assume we're done.
Well, I'll go ahead. So this is a couple that we were very close to also over the years at Jerusalem Baptist, and Karen and I had known them in our ministry even long before we came to New Life, and then we had this reconnection with them. They just completed 50 years of ministry and have now resettled back in Colorado, but they were very also instrumental in those years at Jerusalem Baptist when Doug was there. These are some shots from Beersheba. We'll just whip through these. That's the old house at night. It's all changed now from the early years when that riot
happened. The street's paved.
happened.
I tried to find it, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, that's it now.
I didn't know they paved the streets.
They never had, it's paved streets. They had this, fencing. It's like none of that was there when we were there. This is the Aviv Center that Dov Beekus runs. He's a pastor, but also he organized this incredible ministry to prostitutes and drug addicts. And here we are in 2020 meeting with him. This one guy on the far left there playing the guitars, former prisoner. Now he is one of the directors there. And just incredible time we had just seeing how God has worked in their lives. So keep praying for them. We've been, I think, supporting them as a church and in ministry for many years, he and his wife, Olga. And then we have great relations with Grace and Truth Congregation, which Doug and Tracy have mentioned, Reformed Baptist Congregation in Israel. These are tons of Russian Jews that came one night to a concert that our group Echad put on. And this was the first church in Israel, first major church built in Israel since 1948. They've had a lot of issues just to get the permits, but it's a beautiful, beautiful facility. Anyway, before the concert started there, we had our congregational group here from New Life pass out some of my Russian newspapers, so we had them reading, getting the gospel even as they're waiting for the concert to begin. And then, I think we're almost out of time here at this point. I'll stop there, I think, because Tracy, you'll be able to speak on this tonight. But
you got a picture? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, we want to talk. We'll talk tonight about our relations in Bethlehem with the Awad family. There they are, wonderful, precious family of Palestinian believers. But we'll tell you about how that began, how the ministry of the Jerusalem Gateway Partnership bringing together Israeli and Palestinian pastors began. And so come back tonight, please, to hear that part of the story. And Doug, I'll let you close, and Pastor Sean.
Okay, well, yeah. During the worship service, Frank's going to preach on Colossians 2:19, which is the biblical basis for our partnership. And, so he's preaching and ministering, focusing on Christ. And then Tracy will speak about some of the personal relationships, especially between Arab pastors and Messianic ones. And so we look forward to your part of the story here and for your fellowship in it. So. Okay, so that's as far as we hope to go right now. But yeah, we do have the worship service, and then we'll pull it together this evening. So. All right, here I'll pray. Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to glorify your name. Thank you for our dear brothers and sisters from this congregation and how the congregation has supported this ministry over these past 26 years now. Going on 26 years. Just thank you so much for the freedom that leadership has given to me and also their support. And I just pray, Father, that you please, and thank you for Jay and Jay Storms and Jim Melnick to continue to lead these trips and to continue these relationships. I'm so thankful to know that it will continue beyond me, and I'm so grateful now for this opportunity to give testimony to you and pray that you bless our worship in Jesus' name. Amen.